Let's start the second session of the day, launch of GFI India and Deloitte India Smart Protein Economic Analysis. For this session, again, I'd like to invite Varun Deshpande, President GFI India, to be on stage, along with Mr. Anand Ramanathan. Mr. Anand Ramanathan, can you please join us? So, Mr. Anand Ramanathan leads the food and agribusiness capability for Deloitte in India. He works across the food and agribusiness value chain with Indian and global clients in the areas of growth, diversification, and business transformation. He also helps various governments in India and other developing countries with the formulation of policy and capacity building in agriculture and allied industries. As GFI India's ex-innovation specialist, pretty much 90% of the entrepreneurs, corporate stakeholders, investors that I've worked with over the past 3-4 years have asked this question. What does the economic potential for this sector looks like in India? And India is a data dark country, like some of the panelists earlier were talking about. We do not have a lot of surveys, data on consumption of protein-rich products. We do not know how many vegetarians, vegans, non-vegetarians, and a lot of rich insights around the market potential of this area. So this was a constant asked question to all of us at GFI India. So which is why we started commissioning the study, and I'm sure this session would be very insightful for a lot of audience members today. So in this session, you'll get access to key insights and data from GFI India and Deloitte India's Smart Protein Economic Analysis. The study dwells into the smart protein economic opportunity for India and includes data points on market size, export potential, and many more areas highlighting India's stance to become a leading manufacturer and supplier of raw materials, ingredients, equipment for the sector by 2030. With that, I'll welcome Varun to carry on the presentation.
So Shardul is actually underplaying the number of questions that we've got over the last several years from entrepreneurs, and I see some of you in the crowd today who have been saying, Varun, what is the market size? Because I need to convince my investors to invest more money and to understand what the opportunity is here. So we've been delighted over the last nearly a year to work with Anand's team at Deloitte India to size some of this potential, and it's been an immense challenge. I think Mr. Siraj Hussain, Dr. Sudhanshu, and Siraj Chaudhry ji, I think they've all mentioned that India is pretty data dark. So we've had to do a lot of work to figure out what the best sources of data are, what the consumer demand is, what the export opportunity is. And this really presents us with a set of targets for what we hope to achieve, right? And that we, in this room and in this sector with laser focus, can create a roadmap towards. So bringing up a slide I already put out there earlier, there are a lot of very high estimates or optimistic estimates of what this sector can be globally by 2050. And naturally, there's a very high degree of uncertainty in this range, right? And that is quite natural for a sector that's quite young. And it reflects actually that, as I said earlier, progress and success is not inevitable. There is a range of inputs and interventions that we need to all undertake that get us to the highest possible outcome. I also want to highlight, and this is a well understood concept now, is that new systems, new supply chains, new technologies, they tend to be adopted via what's known as an S-curve. So if you look at this S-curve here, this is for the adoption of recombinant, that is precision fermented insulin. I think we all know we used to get insulin for pharmaceutical purposes from pigs. So companies like Eli Lilly in the US used to load up the pancreases, the frozen pancreases of pigs on these trains from Indianapolis in the US, all over the US to supply insulin for pharmaceutical purposes. And it used to take about 23,000 pounds or about 10,000 kilograms of pig pancreases by weight to get about 1 pound of purified insulin, right? And that was obviously a very inefficient system that is somewhat analogous to what we're doing right now with protein. Now, over the course of time, as technology tends to get adopted, you enter a phase of hypergrowth. Right? If you look at this screen here, the animal insulin use has now tailed off completely. And we're producing most of the insulin now through a clean manufacturing process that's quite similar to what companies like Perfect Day or Clara Foods globally are doing now for precision fermented proteins, or equally companies like String Bio and Loris Bio are doing in India. Now, where are we on this curve for smart protein globally and in India? We are in very much the first lowest part of the curve. We have not yet entered hypergrowth. And there's a huge opportunity for us to enter that hockey stick portion of the graph, but there's a lot of work to do to get there as well. I want to highlight a couple of, I mentioned advantages that India has earlier during the welcome address. I want to highlight just two numbers that always blow my mind when I think about them. So on the right there, India currently has, today, 60% of the share of global vaccine supply. India is the central linchpin to the supply of vaccines on this planet. And this is true for every kind of vaccine. There's a ton of case studies you can take a look at. It's true for targeted cost basis solutions that we've provided globally. So 200 million meningitis A vaccines in 6 months at 50 cents per vaccine. You know, the kinds of things that we're able to accomplish in that industry are astounding, and they offer us a playbook, a target to achieve within Smart Protein. Equally, I think we all know that the Indian Space Research Organization, ISRO, is a fantastic exemplar for all of us to look at when it comes to innovation in high-tech industries. So we were able to send a rover to Mars for 450 crores or $60 million at the time. That is a mind-blowing achievement that simply should not be possible if you consider that simply sending a shuttle into space from other countries costs billions of dollars. So based on this and benchmarking against various industries, looking at all the data that we have, national family health surveys, sample registration surveys, GFI India's consumer research based on who the early adopter is, who the mass market adopter is, etc. We've done a ton of work with Deloitte India over the last year, as I said, to interpolate and find out what our targets should be and what our opportunity is. We came up with 3 scenarios, a low growth scenario, a medium growth scenario, and a high growth scenario. And we find that if you account for domestic and export opportunity, the range of possibilities here is between 12,000 crores by 2030 and 33,000 crores by 2030, which is about 4.5 billion USD, right? And I'll speak a little bit about why there's such a range and what the possibilities of moving from low growth to high growth. But quickly, and I'm not going to delve into these numbers very closely, but you have the opportunity to take a look at a very detailed approach note for this research. If you just scan the QR code, it's one of the links there. The domestic market potential for all categories of Smart Protein is capped at nearly 19,000 crores. The export potential additionally is about 14,000 crores on the highest end. And critically, we can create between 1.5 lakhs and 4.27 lakh jobs by 2030 with the right intervention and investment. All of this means that the total economic contribution of this sector could be about nearly 19,000 crores to the country by 2030. Now, none of these things are guaranteed, right? The highest growth scenario is an optimistic scenario that's based on certain targets being achieved and certain interventions being implemented. This is what we think the roadmap is for the growth of the Smart Protein industry in the country. So to go from low growth to high growth, we need interventions from everyone in this room here today, including all of our partners at this summit. So we're looking at public investment, private investment, philanthropic investment. We're looking at a ton of research and technological commercialization. We're looking at workforce and talent development and incubation of newer startups. We're looking at agricultural integration and value addition, and then finally scaling up. Each of these areas are being covered during this summit, at this main stage, and during the breakout roundtables. And it's important to remember that ultimately what we're trying to do is provide a viable alternative to the meat, eggs, and dairy and protein foods that people know and love. So as Siraj said, we need to provide tasty, healthy, affordable foods that happen to be Smart Protein foods, right? So we're talking about lower prices, improved nutrition and quality, and greater access at every level of the socioeconomic pyramid, as Mr. Siraj Hussain and Dr. Sudhanshu rightly said. That's why we've been calling for and working towards a national mission for Smart Protein with many of our partners here today, as well as others who are unable to be here today. There are many of these areas or these pillars of a national mission that are being covered through the course of the summit as well. Many universities that we've been working on Smart Protein innovation hubs with, many people here today with whom we're working on setting up manufacturing facilities, many startups as well as researchers who are working, as Shardul said, as Dr. Sudhanshu said, on indigenous crops like millets and pulses. And then finally, Smart Protein corridors, which is bilateral and multilateral relationships among different countries. And this is the kind of thing that is needed with the support of agencies like APIDA, like FSSAI, like the Ministry of Food Processing, and of course our private industry partners like FICCI and all the title and key sponsors here. So I'm going to hand over to Anand from Deloitte, whose team has been an absolute boon in evaluating this opportunity. But I will say what we want to do beyond this point is to turn these numbers into dashboards so that they are clear targets. none of these things can come true unless we all come together to make them true. And that is the irony of any economic sizing like this. We need to speak into existence the things that we want to achieve on this planet. And that's really what we're looking to do with this. So we'll be following up with you, the startups, on how to utilize these numbers, with members of the media, with scientists who keep asking us about these numbers. And we'd be happy to answer any of the questions, but please take a look at the approach note and get in touch with us on how you can utilize these numbers. Thank you. Anand?
So thanks a lot, Varun and Team GFI for helping us do this study. I think it's a big opportunity. And going forward, what I will be talking about is the role of smart proteins in the overall objective, right? Now, globally, if you look at sustainability, it's a big theme. And smart proteins has a big role to play in that, especially when you look at India's contribution to this market. We've been working with a lot of state governments. While there was in the earlier session mention about a national policy for smart proteins, a lot of state governments are growing their own state economies, right? And agriculture typically will contribute to at least 20% of the state's GSDP. And hence, going forward, they've all realized that there is a big opportunity around smart proteins, especially when you look at the different kinds of sectors or commodity crops which can come into play. So for example, when we look at smart proteins, we break it up into 4 different areas. So from a plant-based meat standpoint, you'll see that we are the largest producer of chickpea. We have soy meal, which is an important commodity crop. Now, many of these will have a role to play in how plant-based meats evolve. And hence, can we find alternative uses for some of these crops, especially the earlier point was made on value addition. Again, a big part of that value addition can come from looking at proteins, given how the population's food pyramid, if you look at it, people are shifting from carbohydrates into proteins and fresh produce, etc., right? So given that context, how can we use some of the strengths that we have on commodities? The second thing is on fermentation-based proteins, right? Again, recent example, sugar-producing state, excess of sugar. They have 4 years of consumption covered, which is being stored in the warehouses. Now, how do you find alternative uses? I mean, one of it could be ethanol, but why not look at other value-added areas? One of them is, especially from an export standpoint, a lot of consumption in the Middle East, especially on the protein side, used to come from Indian exports, right? Where we used to do ready-to-cook, ready-to-eat, frozen foods, etc., in the entire protein value chain, right? Even before the market got developed in India, we used to export a lot of this. Now, some of that is also getting substituted because there are people there too who are converting into smart proteins, and it's a big movement there from a global sustainability standpoint, right? So these are all areas where it can add value to the Indian value chain. And if you look at dairy again, coconut, the large sea coast that we have lends itself to various algae, which are also involved in smart protein manufacture. So these could all be potential avenues where we look at exports, driving changes in consumption, and on the back of that, earning foreign exchange. Now, moving on, if we were to look at government initiatives, again, there is a lot in the existing ecosystem itself which can be used, right? There are existing policies which can lend themselves to the smart protein ecosystem. So some of them, we've listed it out in terms of what can make a significant difference, especially in driving private investment. And also there is global interest from a donor agency standpoint, right? There are a lot of donor agencies which want to fund sustainability projects. So again, given this context, how can we look at using existing policy, both at the state as well as at the central level, to facilitate the growth of this particular sector? So Varun touched upon the big difference that we saw, right, between the pessimistic scenario and the optimistic scenario. A lot of that is going to be decided by how the government too looks at promoting this space and building enabling policy which will drive some of the support that we have for startups. And one important point here is also to look at plant-based proteins. the potential of this sector for India to own, and if you look at India becoming a food bowl, you'll see that during the COVID period, we provided a lot of assistance to the entire Indian Ocean Rim states on food security. A lot of these countries have realized that they cannot depend on exports and imports, but they need to have their own in-house food ecosystem at play. And hence, from a food security standpoint, especially as India kind of starts playing a more greater role from an Indo-Pacific standpoint, the entire coast of Africa, as well as the Southeast Asian coast, along with Middle East, presents a big opportunity for driving some of these products. With that, I'll also very quickly talk about some of the global impact. Now, if you look at it, it is a 35 trillion USD opportunity, right, in terms of economic loss in India due to climate inaction. And hence, also, like I mentioned, a lot of global interest in driving such projects which have social and environmental impact. So can we attract some of that? And smart proteins is, we've identified about 8 odd levers which will help from a sustainability standpoint. And smart proteins is one of those pillars, right, where we see a lot of value addition to the country's economy, along with the kind of social impact it makes, right? We spoke of 50% of the population involved in agriculture, and hence the number of people who get touched by these initiatives, again, is very large. So with that, again, some more statistics to look at economic gain for India due to decarbonization. It's 11 trillion opportunity. And what we believe is that there's going to be significant gains and a 1.5 degree centigrade world by 2070, right? So that is the other statistic where something like smart proteins can make a big difference. And hence, with that, I will bring an end to this presentation. But what is important to remember is that concluding remarks, firstly, exports is going to drive a lot of consumption. Second, policy making is going to determine how this industry grows and the shape of the curve that it takes. And the third area is how is it that we build a lot of certification and ecosystem enabling that. There was a lot of talk on food safety, but again, if we have to export, especially to countries which have very evolved policies, there needs to be a back-end drive to ensure that the way we produce and the way we process, all of that is covered by the right certifications. So I'll end my presentation with that. Thanks a lot.